we're in Delhi. Kirtanananda's already gone back. Kirtanananda's already returned. And it's just Prabhupada. Oh, Krishna. Shh. Really? Where's Lalita gone?
She just came back from the doctor, so she might come.
Oh, I see. Wow. How kind of her. So they're on their ways to Mayapur, Navadvip. Yeah. So, for the time being, though, I don't know. Anyway, for the time being, they're in Delhi. They're meant to be going to Mayapur, but I don't know if they're actually going to go or when they're going to go. So, right, so they're in Chippiwada, the Radha Krishna temple of Sri Krishna Pandit. Sometimes Prabhupada's visitors would bring donations of cloth or fruits. Oh, wait a minute, we got to chant our prayers. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Niravishesha Shunyavadi Pastya Chadesha Tarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Sometimes Prabhupada's visitors would bring donations of cloth or fruits or even complete cooked meals in metal tiffins. One visitor, a middle-aged woman who had heard Prabhupada speak at the Gauri Shankar temple, came to Prabhupada's office in Chippiwada requesting initiation. Prabhupada spoke with her, agreed, and had Achyutananda prepare a small fire sacrifice. At her initiation, he gave her the name Mukunda Dasi. She came daily to clean Prabhupada's room, and when she saw that his wooden peg sandals were broken, she bought him new ones. Now you might feel it's a little unusual that a lady gets a male name. Does that sound unusual, or it's okay? Is it only me? Doesn't move you at all? It's okay. Yeah, anyway, Mukunda Dasi. And of course there, at that point, and there still is, a Mukunda Das. So there's Mukunda Das and Mukunda Dasi. And there is still, she's sort of around somewhere, a Govinda Dasi, who in her time was quite a famous devotee, an expert on Tulsi. But it's okay because Govinda Dasi just means a female servant of Govinda. Yeah. Or, well, you normally don't get men with female names. I mean, not that I can think of. You get Radha Charan, can be used. I know I know three Radhacharans. One is a lady, a disciple of mine actually, somewhere around Durban. And there are two male Radhacharans that I know. One in China and one Russian. Okay, anyway, Chandrasekhar, who is Sri Krishna Pandit's sort of, I don't know, odd job man, a gopher. You understand this term, gopher, right? Someone who goes for things is a gopher. Yeah. So that's Chandrasekhar. Had known Prabhupada for several years and was supposed to have been his secretary, but he was a drunkard. Prabhupada suspected him of having stolen from his mailbox more than 2,000 rupees during the past 2 years, which, it's 2,000 rupees is 2,000 rupees. But in those days, 2,000 rupees was probably $250. Something like that. So, it is actually fairly serious money. Prabhupada's Chippewater address was listed in his magazines and books. And people had been sending money for books and Back to Godhead subscriptions. Even in the past 2 months, Prabhupada's disciples had written that they were enclosing money in their letters, but Prabhupada never found any. One day he caught sight of Chandrasekhar in the building and asked him, "Where is my mailbox key?" "I believe you have it," Chandrasekhar replied, "or maybe Sri Krishna Pandit has it." Chandrasekhar was drunk. Swamiji Achyutananda said angrily, "Maybe we should make a police case." Prabhupada shook his head. "No." "Well," Achyutananda said, "if he's not punished by the law, then in his next birth Krishna will punish him." "That's true," Prabhupada agreed. Chandrasekhar looked fearfully from Prabhupada to his American disciple. "Then there's only one thing to do," Achyutananda said. "Shall I call the police?" "No," said Prabhupada. "I forgive him." Yet only a few days later, Prabhupada's record player disappeared, and Prabhupada suspected the drunkard, Chandrasekhar. It's amazing. Someone with a name like that, it's like one of Lord Chaitanya's main associates was Chandrasekhar. It's a very sacred name. But the fellow's just wasting his life. Prabhupada brought Achyutananda with him to his bank, the Bank of Baroda, to exchange some American currency. As they were about to enter the door, the guard refused them entry, thinking they were sadhus come to beg. Prabhupada was angry. He spoke loudly in Hindi to the guard, an old man with a shotgun, a big strap of bullets, and a shabby semi-official uniform. "I have an account here," Prabhupada protested. Finally, the guard allowed them to enter. Prabhupada went straight to the manager and complained. "Do you think," Prabhupada said, "because I am a sadhu, I am to be regarded as a beggar?" Prabhupada told the man of his organization in America and his account in the Bank of Baroda. The manager apologized and reprimanded the guard. one day Prabhupada sent a Chutananda to a certain restaurant. If you want to see varieties of Indian food, Prabhupada said, tell the man you want 10 rupees of sweets and 10 rupees of salty preparations. That is called mishti and nimak. And just see the varieties. Achyutananda was sick and couldn't imagine eating a lot of sweets. But he stopped by the restaurant and looked. When he returned to the temple at Chippiwada, he told Prabhupada that he had seen the food, although he couldn't eat it. Yes, but just see the varieties, Prabhupada concluded. And he explained how Krishna consciousness was personal and full of varieties, not dry. Another American disciple joined Prabhupada, Ramanuja from Haight-Ashbury. He had been initiated just before Swamiji had left San Francisco, and he sported a full black beard. Prabhupada didn't like the beard. Cautiously and indirectly, he mentioned it. But Ramanuja's beard stayed. Ramanuja carried a book about Tibetan Buddhism, and he didn't seem fixed in Krishna consciousness philosophy. But here he was, one of the looser, sentimental San Francisco devotees, ready for Indian adventures with Swamiji. Srila Prabhupada visited the wealthy Delhi industrialist, Mr. Seth Dalmia, to discuss plans for printing some of his books in India. Mr. Dalmia received him well, but gave only vague promises of help. Prabhupada also met with Hitsaran Sharma, Mr. Dalmia's secretary, who worked closely with Hanuman Prasad Podar of the popular religious publishing company Gita Press. Srila Prabhupada was already acquainted with all three gentlemen, since they had all donated toward his first volume of Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada wanted Gita Press to publish his Gita Upanishad and Srimad Bhagavatam. Hitsaran Sharma showed him an illustrated Gita in excuse me, an illustrated Gita in Hindi poetry that he had recently published. But my Gita, my Bhagavatam, said Srila Prabhupada, appearing disgusted, is the description of God. It is the description of Krishna. Mr. Sharma said he couldn't see how Gita Press could print Prabhupada's voluminous writings. Nevertheless, Prabhupada still considered privately printing Gita Upanishad, with Mr. Sharma as his agent. On October 11th, Prabhupada wrote to Brahmananda, quote, "We must have our books printed. We have wasted much time in the matter of editing and finding out a suitable publisher. When I was alone, there was 3 volumes published, but during the last 2 years, I could not publish a single volume more. It is a great defeat. If I have 1 or 2 sincere souls like you, and if we can make more publications, then our mission will be a great success. I'm prepared to sit down underneath a tree with 1 sincere soul, and in such activity I shall be freed of all diseases," unquote. Devotees from America were regularly writing Swamiji, anxious to see him again in good health. But he didn't want to leave India, he explained, until he personally saw that the printing of his Gita Upanishad was underway. Printing Gita Upanishad and obtaining approval for permanent residency in the US were the two short-term goals he wished to achieve before returning. But he thought often of his return to America. Quote, "As you're all feeling my separation, similarly I'm also anxious to return as soon as possible. I think I'm fit to go back to your country at present, and as scheduled previously, I'm sure by the end of October. I must be fit to return, but before this, there are many things to be done. I'm not yet assured of the permanent visa. The best thing will be that from each center, an invitation should be sent that my presence is urgently required. Presently, I'm very much anxious to begin printing here if Macmillan Company does not take up the work. Please therefore let me know yes or no from Macmillan. If he is not serious, then immediately send the manuscripts, finished or not, to the following address. Pandit Hitsaran Sharma, care of Dalmia Enterprises, Scindia House, New Delhi. After dispatching, let me know, and I shall do the needful." Unquote. Indian friends who visited Prabhupada's room listened eagerly as he told them about America, the millions of cars and the superhighways, and thousands of young people rejecting their father's wealth. But Prabhupada's visitors weren't fully able to understand his visit to America. Not that they were too simple to understand, and not just that they had never traveled in the West. Prabhupada's experience in America consisted of intimate spiritual relationships with his disciples. How could an outsider understand the dynamics of his temples and his disciples in the West? How could anyone except Prabhupada and his disciples understand these things? Quote from a letter, "My mind is always with you. Practically, your country is my home now. India is a foreign country for me. The reason is that my spiritual family is there, and that my material relationships are in India. Therefore, factually, where my spiritual family exists, there is my home." Unquote. Srila Prabhupada's vision of a worldwide society of devotees preaching in temples and publishing books, a vision he had had even before he had gone to America, was now becoming manifest, but it was dependent on him. In his absence, his disciples were sustained only by carrying out his orders and receiving his letters. When Dayananda and Nandarani had gone from the San Francisco temple to start a temple in Los Angeles, it had been Swamiji's instructions that had sustained and guided them. He said, "Wherever there's a new branch of our society for Krishna consciousness, I become very, very happy. And my blessings in heart and soul are with you." On receipt of Swamiji's letter, they knew they had done the right thing. No matter that husband and wife sometimes quarreled and that there wasn't enough money. The main thing was that Swamiji was pleased. From Boston, Satswarup wrote that he and the other devotees there were moving from an apartment to a rented storefront near Boston University. The first time Satswarup entered the new storefront, he found on the floor an aerogram from Swamiji, dated October the 6th, from Delhi. Quote, "I can understand that you have secured a very nice place in Boston, and there is a very good possibility of pushing our movement amongst the student community there. Our movement is certainly very much appealing to the younger section of your country, and if we're successful in the matter of attracting the student community in your country, certainly this movement will scatter all over the world and fulfill the foretelling of Lord Chaitanya, that in every village and every town of the world, the Lord will be famous for his glorious Sankirtan movement. Please try for this with your heart and soul, and your life will be a successful mission." Unquote. The letter was as good as Swamiji coming personally to open the storefront and begin the preaching. It gave Satswarup full direction and inspiration, and it was personal. In that same letter, Prabhupada had written, quote, "I'm always aspiring after returning to your care and overload you with typewriting tasks. I hope we shall very soon meet again and help each other in the matter of discharging Krishna conscious engagements. I am now 90% all right, and I think I can return safely. This typewriting work is done by me. For 2 days, I'm alone and doing everything myself as experiment. This proves that I'm now well. Please offer my blessings to all the boys and girls there." Unquote. In New Mexico, Subal was trying to arrange public speaking engagements for Prabhupada's return, and Prabhupada was encouraging him. "If you think I can be on television by the first week in December, then you can arrange for it, because I must be in your country by the middle of November." Srila Prabhupada wrote to Janardhan in Montreal, answering his philosophical doubts and encouraging him to be patient with his spiritually reluctant wife. And to Roy Ram, who was editing Back to Godhead magazine in New York, he gave another kind of thoughtful assurance, quote, "I'm very happy that since it, Back to Godhead, is entrusted to you, the things are improving. This means that Krishna is giving you more and more facilities. Krishna is such a nice boss that he gives more facilities and improvement to the sincere student." Unquote. On October the 9th, the day Prabhupada started for Calcutta, he left behind a different kind of letter for Sri Krishna Pandit. Prabhupada had been negotiating with Sri Krishna Pandit to purchase the Chippiwada temple for ISKCON, or at least to rent the single room through a formal contract. Prabhupada wanted the room as a Delhi headquarters for printing his books. On the day of his departure, however, Sri Krishna Pandit was unavailable, and Prabhupada left him a short, handwritten note, quote, "If you are not settling anything with the room, then I may not come back to Delhi anymore. I will go to USA directly from Calcutta via the Pacific route, for which Sri Dalmia Seth has already promised for the ticket." Okay. And now chapter 7, the last chapter of this volume, which is the third volume. Once we've finished this volume, we are halfway. Anyone remember when we started reading Prabhupada-lilamrita? What's that? When I was in Santon, sometime, I can't remember. Okay, so it looks like Prabhupada's just going.
In September, Guru Maharaj.
Oh, okay. Thank you. September, October, November, December. So about 4 months, and we're basically halfway through the book. So this is chapter 7 of this third volume, India Revisited, Part 2. Prabhupada's train, the Kalka Mail, pulled into Delhi station. Prabhupada and his 2 disciples had tickets. Oh, okay, so Achyutananda. Oh, and Ramanuja. And his 2 disciples had tickets with reserved seat numbers, but no car number. So while Prabhupada waited with the luggage, Achyutananda and Ramanuja ran from one end of the train to the other, looking for their car. After they'd found their seats and boarded, Achyutananda untied Prabhupada's bedding and spread it open on the upper tier. Prabhupada climbed the little ladder, sat comfortably on his cotton-stuffed quilt, and opened his Sanskrit Srimad Bhagavatam, while Achyutananda and Ramanuja took their seats. It would take around 24 hours to reach Calcutta. Near the end of the journey, a group of educated Bengali gentlemen struck up a philosophical conversation with the Swami. "We do not worship any form," said one, speaking fluent English in a loud, deep voice. "We have a marble Omkar that we worship, and we sit and pray to that." "That is also a form," said Prabhupada. He was reluctant to attack their philosophical position directly. "We practice karma yoga," the gentleman went on, not heeding Prabhupada's previous point, because in karma yoga you can stay within your position. "But karma yoga is not full surrender of the soul," said Prabhupada. "One must come to the stage of bhakti." "Oh no," the man protested. "Emotionalism is very harmful. Karma yoga," Srila Prabhupada exploded. "Karma yoga is for the fools." Silence. Another man, not with the Bengalis, but seated beside them, spoke up. "Obviously, Swamiji is a learned scholar," he said. "You shouldn't argue like that." The Bengali that Prabhupada had shouted at got up and moved to another seat. Later he came back. "Are you insulted?" Prabhupada asked him. No, he replied. "But I've never heard anyone say that about the teachings of the Gita." The Bengalis then talked with Achyutananda, lighting their cigarettes and smoking freely before him. although they had not dared to do so before Prabhupada. It wasn't proper to smoke in front of a sadhu. Bengalis, Achyutananda told them, citing one of Prabhupada's examples, were very sorry that East Pakistan had been cut off from the rest of Bengal. But Krishna consciousness could elevate people to international, universal consciousness. Then there wouldn't be any such division. The Bengalis appreciated Achyutananda's remark, although they continued to blow smoke in his face as the train rattled over the last miles to Calcutta. Prabhupada was greeted at Calcutta's Howrah station by relatives, mostly from his sister's family, and by devotees of the Goswami Mutt. About 50 people were on hand. They offered Prabhupada flower garlands and sandalwood paste, and then escorted him and his disciples into a car. Achyutananda and Ramanuja noticed that although Swamiji's sister was shorter and more rotund than Prabhupada, her facial features were strikingly similar. You seen photos of Pishima? Or did you ever see her? Did you meet her in Mayapur? Yeah, she looked like a little round female Prabhupada. That's what she looked like, really. Okay. Her name was Bhavatarini, but Prabhupada told them to call her Pishima, aunt. As Prabhupada rode through the streets, he saw many images of goddess Kali, 10-armed, riding a lion. Calcutta was observing the biggest religious celebration in Bengal, Kali Puja, a month of festivities in honor of the goddess Kali. Throughout the city, brass bands and radio music blared, and there were decorative lights, stages, and tents. When Prabhupada arrived at Pishima's house in South Calcutta, his relatives seated him and performed an arti ceremony in his honor, reverentially offering him the traditional items, incense, a flaming lamp, flowers. They also bathed his feet. He sat smiling within the crowded room of relatives who were proud of his having journeyed to America on behalf of Lord Krishna. As Prabhupada's family members sang Hare Krishna Kirtan, from outside the room the ladies of the house began singing a high, shrill, whooping sound. It's not singing, and it's not whooping either. Anyway, you heard that. You must have heard that. You heard that. Yeah. Achyutananda and Ramanuja were startled. They only do it in Bengal. They don't do it in, Vrindavan, Delhi. They don't do it. Pishima had prepared a large feast, much of it cooked in mustard seed oil for the homecoming celebration. She really liked cooking in mustard oil. Well, generally Bengalis, that's what they do. And Prabhupada satisfied her by honoring the prasadam, even though he wasn't feeling well and was tired from the train ride. Soon after the festivities, Prabhupada and his disciples retired. Again his health wavered, this time because of his sister's heavy cooking, and he felt a strain on his heart. He sent for an Ayurvedic doctor who taught Achyutananda how to do a very gentle massage to help circulation, and he also restricted Prabhupada from sweets. As Prabhupada recovered, he began regularly lecturing in his room during the evening. Although he spoke in English for his disciples, the room would soon fill to capacity with relatives and friends. There were generally disturbances from outside due to the noises of Kali Puja. Nearby Pashima's house was a large tent, a center for evening street parties, which included a sweets counter, fireworks, and an excessively loud public address system that incongruously blared Julie Andrews singing songs from The Sound of Music. Oh, Krishna. Oh, my Lord. One evening as Prabhupada spoke, my only qualification is that I have unflinching faith in my spiritual master. A large firecracker exploded right outside the door. The audience smiled tolerantly. Yes, Prabhupada said, taking the explosion as confirmation of his words. It is glorious. One night, Prabhupada explained that according to Bhagavad Gita, demigod worshippers are less intelligent. People worship Kali for material rewards, he said. But since all material things are temporary, such worship is inferior to the worship of Krishna. Kali is not able to grant the worshipper liberation from birth and death. Which is better, Achyutananda asked? The worship of the Christians and Jews, which is mostly impersonal, or the worship of the non-absolute by the worshippers of Kali? Worship of Kali is better, Prabhupada said, because the worshippers are in the Vedic system. They are more likely to bow down to Radha Krishna or chant Hare Krishna than a Christian or Jew. There is a chance that they'll become Krishna devotees in the future, even or if they lose their material attachments. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Comments, questions? Wait for the mic.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Yes.
I got a question to ask. Is Mother Kali is devotee of Krishna or
Madhukari.
I mean Bhadrakali.
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 Well, sort of, yes. Because she's a form of Durga. And Durga is a great devotee. She's one of the main expansions of Durga.
So, secondly, she used to eat meat, or she's a vegetarian? Or?
She accepts offerings of meat because that's her service. You know, she's there to give shelter or encourage the people who are really in Tamagun. Yeah. So she, she accepts those things, like Chandi. Were you here the other night when we read about Lord Nityananda? That the criminals worship Chandi by offering meat and wine. So, it may be, she may accept the offering, but, I don't think she really eats it. Just as a formality, she may say, okay, and take it. But she's a devotee. So is Garuda. And Garuda is non-veg. He eats snakes, but he's a great devotee. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Sort of, yeah. And Mataji, I think, once.
Maharaj, actually, I heard that Kali doesn't herself eat all the offerings, but she feeds her dogs, or something like that.
Her what?
She feeds her dogs, her
Dogs.
associates.
Okay. Thank you.
But I have a question. How do we develop unflinching faith in our spiritual masters?
Well, through serving them and associating with them. Yeah, through association. Prabhupada explains in Bhagavad Gita, what is it? Let me just check. Chapter 9, verse 3. I think it's the right verse. Let me just check. Chapter 9, verse 3. Purport. Faith is created by association with devotees. Unfortunate people, even after hearing all the evidence of Vedic literature from great personalities, still have no faith in God. They're hesitant and cannot stay fixed in the devotional service of the Lord. Thus, faith is a most important factor for progress in Krishna consciousness. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said that faith is the complete conviction that simply by serving the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, one can achieve all perfection. That is called real faith. So if you read that purport, Prabhupada goes on, there's a whole lot about faith. It's a fairly long purport. Now the development of that faith is the process of Krishna consciousness. Anyway, the basic point Prabhupada said was that faith is created by association with devotees. So therefore, we should associate nicely with more advanced devotees.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Any words of wisdom, Mother Radha Radhanath? You're such a senior devotee. You've been a devotee 40 years. Plus 42 years. Yeah. Okay. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.